June noticed the car before Wes Calloway did, which was the usual order of things between them. She was a 5-year-old yellow Labrador who worked the overnight lot at the Savemore on Keatskey Lane with Wes the way she did everything, thoroughly, without urgency, with the air of a creature who had decided that paying attention was a job worth doing well. Wes did security at the store from 10 at night to 6 in the morning, 4 nights a week, walking the lot and the loading dock and the long fluorescent aisles during the dead hours, and June walked it with him. And over the months she had developed opinions about the lot that Wes had learned to consult. The car was a silver Buick, 15 years old, parked in the far northeast corner of the lot under the one light that didn't work, which Wes had noted as a choice rather than an accident, the spot a person picks when they want to be present, but not seen. June had started sitting near it, not at it, near it, 20 feet off, facing it, in the patient, settled way she sat when she had taken an interest in something and was waiting to understand it better. She had done this 3 nights in a row before Wes followed her attention and really looked at the Buick and saw what June had already concluded, that the windows were fogged from the inside in the way windows fog when someone is breathing behind them, that there was a sunshade up against the windshield at 2 in the morning, that the car had been in the same corner under the same dead light for longer than a car parks in a grocery lot. Someone was living in it. What Wes Calloway and his K9 found in that silver Buick in the far corner of a Reno parking lot, and what they found in the history of the woman behind the fogged glass, who had done everything right for 72 years and ended up sleeping in a 15-year-old car anyway, would not be a rescue in the dramatic sense. There was no one to fight. There was only a woman who had become invisible by degrees over 6 months, and the slow, unglamorous, entirely real work of making her visible again and giving her back something she had earned a long time ago and never known she was owed. If this is the kind of story that stays with you, subscribe. This one is about being seen. You'll want to be here for what she'd been carrying. Wes had grown up in Sparks, the next town over, and had come back to the Reno area after the service because it was home and because the cost of being somewhere else had stopped seeming worth it. He was 33 years old and had served 2 tours with the 1st Marine Division, and had come home with a particular alertness that the service installs and does not fully uninstall, which had made overnight security a reasonable fit. The hours suited a sleep schedule that had never fully returned to normal, and the work used the part of him that scanned a space and cataloged what belonged in it and what didn't. He was good at the job in a way that had nothing to do with confrontation, which the job rarely required. He was good at it because he noticed things, and because he had learned in 8 years of service and the years since that most situations that look like security problems are actually people problems wearing a security problem's clothes, and that the people involved usually need something other than to be moved along. June had come to him through a veterans placement program 3 years ago. She was a yellow lab with a steadiness that Wes had come to rely on, and a quality of social attention that he had stopped trying to explain to people and simply accepted. She read rooms, read lots, read people, and she directed his attention to the things that mattered with a reliability that exceeded his own. She was not a guard dog. She was an attention dog. She found the thing in the environment that needed a human to notice it, and she sat near it, and she waited for Wes to catch up. She had been sitting near the silver Buick for 3 nights. Eleanor Whitfield had not planned to live in her car, which was true of essentially everyone who lives in a car. She was 72 years old and had worked as a bookkeeper for 41 years, most of them for a single firm, a heating and cooling contractor on the east side of Reno, where she had kept the books with the meticulous, error-free competence of a woman who understood that numbers were a form of honesty and that her job was to keep the company honest with itself. She had retired at 66, with a small pension and her Social Security and a savings account that she had built carefully over 4 decades, and she had believed, with good reason, that she had done the things a person does to be all right. She had been all right for a while. Then, the rent on her apartment, which she had lived in for 9 years, had gone up by $400 in a single renewal, which was a thing that was happening across Reno as the city changed and the money moved in, and $400 was the difference between a margin and no margin. She had absorbed it for a year by economizing in the ways that careful people economize. Then she had fallen. A curb, a wrong step, nothing dramatic, and broken her wrist, and the cascade of medical costs that followed had revealed to her, in the patient way that medical billing reveals things, that the gap between what Medicare covered and what she owed was a gap she did not have the savings to fill. Not after the rent increase, not at her age, not without the income she no longer had. The savings went. Then the apartment went, because when the next renewal came, she could not sign it, and there was no other apartment in Reno at a rent she could sign, because the city had moved past her while she was being careful. She had the Buick. It was paid off. It was reliable. It had been Roy's car before it was hers, and she had kept it running because Roy had taught her that you keep a good car running, and she had moved into it in the spring with the grim, organized practicality of a woman who had spent 41 years keeping books and was not going to fall apart over a logistics problem, even when the logistics problem was where she was going to sleep. She had a system. She showered at a fitness center where she had kept the membership specifically for this purpose. $12 a month, the cheapest one in the city. She kept her clothes clean at a laundromat. She parked overnight in places she had scouted for being safe and quiet and unlikely to draw attention. The Save More lot was the best of them. Well lit, except for the one corner. Busy enough that a parked car was not unusual, with a bathroom inside that was open all night. She ate carefully. She kept her appointments. She still had appointments. The doctor, the eye exam, the dentist she paid in installments. She kept her hair done every 6 weeks, $15 at a beauty school where the students practiced. She kept her hair done because the day someone could tell, by looking at her, that she was living in a car was the day she stopped being a woman who was having a hard time and became a homeless woman. And she understood the difference between those two things with a clarity that came from watching how people's faces changed when the second category became visible. She was not going to let her face become the second category. She was going to keep her appointments and keep her hair done and keep her books. She still kept books. A small ledger of her own dwindling money, balanced to the penny. And she was going to figure it out, the way she had figured out everything for 72 years. By herself, without becoming a problem that other people had to look at. Roy had died 8 years ago. He had been a good man, a quiet man. An electrician who had served in the Army before she met him. Korea. The 1st Marine Division attached units. The cold he never talked about. And he had loved her steadily for 45 years and left her with the Buick and the savings and the belief that she would be all right. She would have hated that he could not see her now, not because she was ashamed in front of him. Roy would not have been ashamed of her. But because he had worked his whole life so that she would not have to sleep in his car. And the fact that she was sleeping in his car felt, on the hard nights, like a failure of the promise their whole life together had been built on. She had not known that Roy's service made her eligible for anything. She had never thought of herself as a veteran's widow in the sense that came with benefits. Roy had not used the VA much, had not talked about it, had built their life on his own work rather than on anything the government owed him. And the idea that there might be survivor support, housing assistance, a pension she had never claimed, had simply never entered the frame of how Eleanor Whitfield understood her own situation. She had been doing the math on her own ledger for 6 months, without knowing there was a whole other column she had never been told to add. Wes did not knock on the window the first night he understood. He thought about it and decided against it. Because a security guard knocking on the window of someone's car at 2 in the morning was, regardless of intent, a frightening thing to be on the receiving end of. And because a woman alone in a car had every reason to be afraid of exactly that. And because the goal was not to move her along, the goal, which had assembled itself in him over the 3 nights June had been sitting near the Buick, was something else. He did a different thing instead. The next night he left a bottle of water and a granola bar on the ground beside the driver's door, where she would find it, but would not have to interact with him to receive it. And he walked on, and June walked with him, and he did not look back. The night after that, the water and the granola bar were gone and there was a folded paper towel where they had been, weighted with a small stone, and on the paper towel, in careful handwriting, "Thank you. I'm all right." Wes read it. He understood it. "I'm all right" was the sentence of a person who was not all right, and had decided that the management of other people's concern was one more logistics problem she would handle herself. He left water and a granola bar again the next night. And the night after. On the 5th night, when he came around the corner of the lot, the driver's window of the Buick was down a few inches, and the woman was sitting up, visible, looking at him with the composed, slightly formal expression of a person who has decided to have a conversation on her own terms, rather than continue to have things left at her door. "You're the one leaving the water," she said. "Yes, ma'am. You don't have to do that." "No, ma'am." "I know." June had walked to the side of the car and sat down beside the door, looking up at the woman, and the woman looked down at the dog, and something in her composed expression moved, the specific loosening that June produced in people, the small involuntary softening of a face that has been held carefully for a long time. "What's the dog's name?" the woman said. It was not really a question. It was a way of continuing the conversation without having to be the subject of it. "June," Wes said. The woman put her hand out the window, palm down, and June stepped forward and put her head under it, and the woman held the dog's head for a moment with the careful gentleness of someone who has not touched a living thing in longer than is good for a person. "I'm Wes," he said. "Eleanor," the woman said. After a pause, in the tone of someone offering a thing she did not offer often, "Nell, have you ever been having a much harder time than anyone around you knew, and worked hard to make sure they didn't know?" Type yes in the comments if you understand exactly why Nell kept her hair done. A lot of people understand it. You're not alone in it. It took 4 more nights before Nell would accept a cup of coffee from the store and sit on the bench outside the entrance with Wes during his 2 a.m. break, June between them, and tell him any of it. She told it the way she kept books, in order, accurately, without embellishment, the rent increase and the wrist and the medical cascade and the savings and the apartment, the clean sequence of a careful life meeting a set of numbers that careful was no longer enough to solve. She did not tell it for sympathy. She told it, Wes understood, because it was the first time in 6 months that someone had created a space in which the telling was possible, and the not telling had been its own kind of weight, and the weight had gotten heavy. "I kept my appointments," she said, at one point looking at the parking lot rather than at Wes. "I kept my hair done. I didn't want anyone to know, because the day someone knows, you stop being a person who's having a hard time and you start being a homeless woman. And those are treated like 2 different species. I have watched it happen. I was not going to let it happen to me." She said it without self-pity and without apology, as a clear-eyed account of a strategic decision made by a competent woman managing an impossible situation with the only tools she had, which were dignity and routine, and the refusal to let her face become a category. Wes did not tell her it would be all right, because he did not yet know that it would be, and because Nell was not a woman you said empty things to. He asked her one question instead. He asked it because something she had said, the cold he never talked about, had caught in his attention the way June caught things in hers. "Your husband," he said. "You said he served. Was he a veteran?" "Roy," Nell said. "Army, Korea. He didn't talk about it." She paused. "Why? What years?" Wes said. She told him. And Wes, who had spent 8 years in the 1st Marine Division and had a grandfather who had served in Korea and who knew, from his own family's navigation of the VA, a great deal about what a veteran's service could mean for the people they left behind, felt the specific click of a thing falling into place. "Nell," he said, "did you ever apply for survivor benefits?" Nell looked at him. "Survivor benefits," she said, in the tone of a woman encountering a phrase she had heard but had never applied to herself. "VA survivor benefits. Dependency and indemnity compensation, or a survivor's pension, depending on his service and your income. There's also veterans' housing assistance you might qualify for as his widow." He kept his voice level, factual, because this was not a moment for excitement. Excitement would have felt like a salesman, and Nell had spent 6 months being careful about exactly that. "If Roy served the way you're describing, and your income is what you've told me, there's a real chance there's support you've been eligible for this whole time and never claimed." Nell was quiet for a long moment. "I never thought of myself as," she started and stopped. "I'm not a veteran. Roy was the veteran." "You're a veteran's widow," Wes said. "The system has a whole set of things for that. Most people don't know about them. A lot of people who are eligible never claim them, because nobody ever tells them, and they don't think to ask, because they think of the benefits as belonging to the person who served, not to the family who served alongside them." Nell looked at the parking lot. June had put her head on Nell's foot. "Roy would have known to ask," she said quietly. "Roy was good at that. The forms. He'd have known." "You don't have to know," Wes said. "I know someone who knows." The someone was a woman named Grace Okafor, who ran a Veterans Services Navigation program out of a Reno church. Not a chaplaincy thing, a practical thing. A small office with 2 staff, and a volunteer corps who helped veterans and their families find and claim the benefits they were entitled to and were not receiving, which turned out to be an enormous and largely invisible population. Wes had worked with Grace before, in the informal way that people who do adjacent good work end up working together, and he called her the morning after his conversation with Nell, before he went home to sleep, because some calls do not keep. Grace listened. Grace asked the right questions, which were questions about Roy's service dates and discharge status and Nell's current income, and whether Nell had Roy's DD-214, the discharge document that was the key to everything. Nell had it. Of course Nell had it. Nell was a bookkeeper who had kept every important document of her life in an accordion folder that traveled with her in the trunk of the Buick, organized by category, and Roy's D-214 was in the folder under M for military, where it had been since the day Roy died, and Nell had filed it the way she filed everything, never imagining it was a key to a door she didn't know existed. Grace met them at the church office 2 days later. She went through the folder with the fluency of a woman who had done this hundreds of times, and she looked at Roy's service record, and she looked at Nell's income documentation, which Nell produced from the same folder, with the same penny-accurate completeness, and Grace said, "Mrs. Whitfield, you're eligible for a survivor's pension. And based on your situation, you're eligible for it at the housebound or aid and attendance rate, which is higher. And you've been eligible since Roy died. The claim can be filed today. It's retroactive in some circumstances, which we'll look into. And there's a HUD-VASH housing component you qualify for as a veteran's surviving spouse that can get you into stable housing on an accelerated basis. Nell sat in the chair in the small church office and did not say anything for a moment. "How long?" she said finally. Her voice was very controlled. "How long has this been available to me?" Grace, who had delivered this information to many people and knew the specific grief that followed it, the grief of the years spent struggling within reach of help that no one had told you about, answered gently and honestly. "Since Roy passed." 8 years. Nell closed her eyes. Wes had braced for this, because he had seen it coming. The moment when the relief of being helped collides with the devastation of how long the help had been sitting there unclaimed, and the collision produces something that is neither relief nor anger but a kind of vertigo, the sensation of a person looking back at years of unnecessary hardship. But Nell was a bookkeeper, and bookkeepers do not stay in the vertigo. They reconcile. She opened her eyes. "Then we should file it," she said. "Today, if it can be filed today." "It can," Grace said. "Then let's not waste any more of it," Nell said. June, who had been lying under the table in the small office, put her chin on Nell's foot. The honest part, which the series has learned to tell, it did not all happen at once. The survivor's pension claim took 11 weeks to process, fast for the VA, an eternity for a woman sleeping in a car, and Grace's program had emergency resources that bridged the gap. A motel voucher, then transitional housing through the church's network while the HUD-VASH paperwork moved. Nell did not love accepting the bridge help. She accepted it because Grace framed it correctly, not as charity, but as the floor underneath a benefit Nell had already earned and was simply waiting to receive. A distinction that mattered enormously to a woman who had spent 6 months refusing to become a category. The pension came through in the fall. Retroactive 18 months, not the full 8 years, but to a woman who had been balancing a ledger to the penny, a foundation. The housing placement came 3 weeks later, a 1-bedroom in a quiet senior building on the west side, income restricted, clean, with a window that faced east, which Nell mentioned because she had not had a window that faced anywhere in 6 months, and the morning light was a thing she had missed more than she had let herself know. She kept the Buick. She had it serviced with the first month of the pension, because Roy had taught her you keep a good car running, and because the Buick had kept her safe for 6 months, and she did not discard a thing that had served her faithfully. Wes still worked the overnight lot. Nell came by sometimes in the early evening with coffee from the good place, and they sat on the bench with June between them. And Nell told him about the senior center 2 blocks from her building, where she had started keeping the books, because a woman who has kept books for 41 years does not stop. And fixing their mess had given her back the feeling the 6 months had taken, which was being useful to people rather than a problem for them. It was on one of those evenings, as the Reno sky did the enormous orange thing it does over the Sierra in the fall, that Nell told Wes about the D-214 again, how it had been in the folder, under M, the whole time. How she had carried the key to a locked door in the trunk of her car for 6 months, across every parking lot, never knowing it was a key. "That's the part I can't get past," she said. "Not the years. The folder. I had it the whole time. It was right there." "You couldn't have known," Wes said. "No," Nell agreed. "But somebody should have told me. The system knew Roy died. The system knew who I was. Somebody, somewhere, could have sent a letter." She looked at the sky. Instead, it was a dog in a parking lot. June, hearing herself referenced in the tone people used when they were grateful to her, thumped her tail once against the concrete. There are people who fall through the gaps not because they did anything wrong, but because the gap was never explained to them. Who do everything right, who keep their appointments and their hair done, and their books balanced to the penny, and who end up sleeping in a paid-off car within reach of help that no one ever told them was theirs. The help is real. It exists. It is sitting in offices and statutes and accordion folders under M for military, waiting for someone to connect the person to the thing they are owed. Sometimes the someone is a navigator in a church office. Sometimes it is a Marine on an overnight shift, and sometimes, before either of them, it is a yellow dog who decided that a silver car in the dark corner of a parking lot was worth sitting near, night after night, until the human she worked with finally looked where she was looking and saw the woman behind the fogged glass who had spent 6 months making sure no one would. June found her first. She found her because she was a dog, and dogs do not sort people into the categories that Nell had spent 6 months terrified of falling into. To June, there was no difference between a woman having a hard time and a homeless woman. There was only a person in a car who was alone, and aloneness was a thing June was built to notice and to sit near and to stay with until someone came. Someone came. This story is for every person who is doing everything right and still falling, who is keeping up appearances because being seen feels more dangerous than being unseen, who has not asked for help because asking means becoming a category. You are not a category. And there may be a door you don't know about, a benefit, an assistance, a thing you earned or a thing someone you loved earned for you, sitting in an office or a folder waiting to be claimed. If you served, or someone you loved served, find a Veterans Services navigator. If you didn't, find a benefits navigator anyway. The doors are real. Most people never find out they're standing right next to one. And if you ever see a car parked in the same dark corner of a lot, night after night with the windows fogged from the inside, you don't have to knock. You can just leave a bottle of water. It says, "I see you, and I'm not going to make it worse." That's where it starts. Do you know about a benefit or a resource that people don't know to ask for? Something you found out about too late or just in time? Share it in the comments. You might tell someone about a door they're standing next to right now. This section could genuinely help somebody. If this channel is one you want to stay with, subscribe. Every story here is for the people standing next to doors they don't know about. There are more of them. You will want to be here for the next one. What will you carry from this one? Nell keeping her hair done? Or the deed 214 under M for military the whole time? Tell me in the comments. I'll see you there.